I was just totting up this morning the number of things where Donald Trump has intervened on Russia's behalf. So, the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, number one, has ordered a halt to cyber ops against Russia. Two, Trump has told the Treasury to start looking at what sanctions can be eased against Russia. Three, Donald Trump, of course, called for elections in Ukraine, a Putin talking point. The US voted with Russia at the UN to oppose the motion condemning Russia's aggression in Ukraine. And of course, now the suspension of these weapons that had been agreed, this $1 billion worth of weapons that could have such a devastating effect almost immediately on the way Ukraine can defend itself. Not attack Russia, can defend itself from Russia. And so, when you raise the question, Lewis, as you've done, what does Ukraine do now? Or is it all over for Ukraine? You start to think it is, because whatever Europe can put in place is going to take time. And time isn't on Ukraine's side right now.
I don't think we should look at this as a peace plan from Trump. This is diplomacy by naughty step. In other words, Trump is pissed at Zelensky. We know that from everything we saw on Friday night. He's still after an apology. He's still after gratitude. He's still after something from Zelensky that looks like submission. And I mean that in the most fundamental sense. Trump wants to see this man on his knees. And this is the firmest, quickest, simplest way of making Zelensky come begging back to the Oval Office right now. And I guess the question that is sort of overriding this in a way is, if Zelensky were to sign up to Trump's deal, giving up Ukraine land, freedom, lives, essentially, giving into all Russia's concessions, why wouldn't he just go straight to Putin? What advantage is there in him coming to Trump at all, whereas Trump wants more minerals from a deal? I don't think it makes any sense that Zelensky does come crawling back, but there are people now, there are EU leaders, there are diplomats who think that that has to happen. And they will never stop calling Trump an ally, as we heard Starmer do yesterday, because they still think there is room to overturn this, to actually get him to unlock the freeze on military aid and start putting it Ukraine's way. This is not transactional, this is personal. Trump is offended, and that's at the bottom of this.
I think it's personal and ideological. We've been talking on for the last few weeks, trying to understand and unpick for everybody listening why we think it is that Trump is making these astounding moves, these moves which are in their collective form unpicking 8 decades worth of shared understanding, transatlantic understanding and alliance. And I think that part of the reason, as we've discussed, is because, whether it's Trump or not, but certainly people around Trump, including people who have been at the heart of the MAGA movement, like Steve Bannon, why do they want to dismantle or certainly not defend a liberal European democracy? They don't like liberal European democracies. They are far more ideologically, ideationally, sentimentally attached to a regime like Russia because of what it represents and which side it is on the culture war and which side it is in terms of the clash between autocracy and democracy than they are on our side. And Emily, I think that you summed up exactly right. We shouldn't be talking about a Trump peace plan. This is a Trump plan, actually, to make the war longer. I'm really sick of hearing from sort of MAGA apologists and people, the sort of the White House, people talking about how Trump wants to bring peace. Whether he thinks this will bring peace or not is somewhat beside the point. The only guarantee of this is to make the war longer. Why? Because what Trump has done, John, you just read out that list. What Trump has done in the last 6 weeks is basically remove all of the leverage, the substantial leverage that the United States had over Russia. All of the things that might have brought Putin to the table, right? Trump, the self-styled master negotiator, has basically given away every card he has. And in those circumstances, why would Putin stop the war? The only circumstances now in which Putin would stop the war is if he gets every single thing that he wants, which is clearly completely unacceptable to the Ukrainians, who do have enough arms and European support to fight on. Okay, it might be very difficult, but they will fight on, because what is the alternative in these circumstances?
I think this goes back to a moment in that dreadful White House, grotesque White House Oval Office meeting, which has been slightly overlooked. the point at which Trump got really angry with Zelensky was, I think, earlier than most of us realised. It was when Zelensky was trying to explain that under the Minsk agreement that they'd signed, Putin carried on killing Ukrainians. He carried on fighting in Ukraine. He carried on waging his war. And Trump didn't like this because it was during those years that Trump was in office. Now, Trump's whole shtick, his whole kind of narrative has been Putin never invaded when I was in office. And Zelensky's going, mate, he did.
Yeah.
He was still killing
Yeah.
people then. He was still killing our Ukrainian people then. Trump couldn't bear that because it undermines his whole story that bad things don't happen when he's in office.
He hates
and
the
they
truth.
clearly do. He hates the truth. And so, in a way, you're absolutely right. This isn't meant to end the war. It's meant to give Americans an inroad into Ukraine's minerals. I mean, a decades-long plan, which obviously will enrich America fundamentally, not Ukraine. And if there is no security guarantee from Trump, even at this point, if there is no military security guarantee, why would you sign that? What does Zelensky get from that? I fail to see what he gets, except if we're still in this weird place of believing that Trump doesn't mean what he says. I think he does mean what he says. He always means what he says.
Look, we've heard from Starmer saying that he believes that America and the UK are sort of in lockstep in wanting the same thing. And I heard Angela Rayner on the radio this morning, defending, not saying a word of criticism about Trump and saying, Keir Starmer is absolutely determined. He's got laser-like focus, a phrase I'm really tired of, about getting this done. I would love to know if he really thinks and why he thinks that America is on the same page as Europe and the UK, because all the evidence is pointing into some completely different direction. All the evidence is pointing to the fact that what America wants is the economic rape of Ukraine by taking its minerals and just saying, thank you very much, we'll have all of those. That's very nice. And Russia, the geographical rape of Ukraine, where it takes, a third of the territory and will come back for more a little bit later on. I don't know what the evidence is to make Macron and Starmer think that they can do a deal with Trump on this and that they are of like minds, because it looks like that the Americans are doing everything they can to undermine the European efforts, and JD Vance on Fox News gave no impression of anything different.
That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. The security guarantee and also the economic guarantee for Ukraine is to rebuild the country and ensure that America has a long-term interest. You're not going to do that if you come to the Oval Office, insult the president, and refuse to follow his plan for peace.
Yet again, JD Vance, the master diplomat, managing to wade in and cause great offence this time between Britain and France, enraging even the right-wing press in the UK and former UK Conservative defence ministers when he said that troops from a random country that haven't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. Given that the UK and France are the only countries so far to have pledged troops, it has led people to the obvious inference that what he was saying is that he was talking about Britain and France, and of course Britain lost over 600 soldiers in the Iraq and Afghan wars fighting alongside American troops.
Yeah, he's pissed off a lot of people with that remark, and he's tried to row back from it. He's quite embarrassed, actually. He's trying to point out that he never mentioned France or Britain by name, but of course those are the only countries that have signed up to any kind of peacekeeping ideal.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.